I'm thinking that we have a lot. Do we have sound now? I think maybe we do. So let's try again. From the beginning, we will be painting some more miniatures for the game Cthulhu Wars today. To be specific, we will be painting the faction known as the Yellow Sign, which among others deal with the great old one called Hastur, who we have here. It's a beautiful little baby. I counted the number of mouths he has. I think it's probably not him who's that bad. He only looks like he's got 3 or so, give or take a few. Oh, he has Terpy. You are so funny. You're so clever. You should, be a comedian or something like that. So, like with the other miniatures we did, the Windwalker and the Sleeper factions, we are going to simply use Citadel contrast paints. For this one, we are using the Ayandan Yellow, if it's pronounced like that. And it's basically just going to be a speed job. We have the usual handful of cultists, we have a handful of small monsters, and a few larger monsters, and of course the 2 old ones. We will also just be preparing a little bit off camera here, trying not to spill paint and stuff all over my table. I think that succeeded in not spilling the paint. That's always a good start. Yep, you just keep on going, Modivian. Hey AJ. So, for now, these are basically the miniatures we're going to be painting today, with Hastur in the background. And it's gonna be fun. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be. I think that is as much as we can hope for. The cultists are a little bit like this. And again, it's still not very good at focusing, even though I actually brought up the camera a little bit, so it should be better. And I'm getting some new gear, AJ, exactly. I would like to show you, but I'm currently using, because I didn't have anything else, this is the box that has my new Canon EOS M50 camera in it. I chose not to try and get that ready for today because there are so many settings that need to be done, and also I could not get an actual power supply for the camera. So yeah. Oh, you have an M50? Oh, you have the C922. And yeah, I'm using Streamlabs OBS. Yes, you have the Logitech. Yeah, I have the Logitech as well. But the Logitech is, I found, really bad at keeping autofocus. So I wanted to get a real camera up and running. But yeah, I got it this afternoon, and so yeah. Yes, I can do that, but then if I move the miniatures up and down, the focus length is going to be changing, and I'm not good at just keeping it at the exact same distance. Although I guess it will still be better than this. What I can't figure out is what it's actually using as its focus. Where is it trying to find the focus? Is it seeing my hands or whatever? But yeah. But I might actually just do it anyway. Do the focus, and I think it needed to be somewhere around, well, not there maybe. Just need to mess around a little bit more. I should do this off stream, I guess, but it's sometimes a little difficult to figure out until I actually have the final setup. I think that is somewhat usable. Yeah, I think we can live with that. so I'll move the glass away. Thank you. Just move it all the way over here. But anyway, yeah, of course, not doing autofocus. I think this actually seems fairly okay. So, well, we have the cultists in my left hand, and we have some undead. I don't know if they're zombies or mummies or whatever there are in my right hand, but I think we're just gonna work our way up from the cultists and all the way up to the great old ones. So, and again, we're listening to music from Adrian von Ziegler. Wonderful music, nice background music, and he allows people to use it for free. It says so directly in his YouTube videos, so it must be true. So yeah, so what are people up for? What have you been up to today? No, nothing? Well, then I'll just keep on chatting because that's what I do. As I mentioned before, I went to pick up the camera because I heard from a friend who's also streaming. In Danish, it's called Dukker and Dæmoner, which is a spoof off of a mix of different role-playing games that has happened over time. One is, of course, Dungeons and Dragons, but there's also the Swedish, later translated to Danish, Drager og Dæmoner, which means dragons and demons in English. So Dolls and Demons is a bit of a spoof on all of that, I guess. But we've been talking about cameras and streaming equipment a few times. And we talked about today that they've launched, or at least advertised, Canon, that they have a new version of the M50 coming out soon. That's the Mark II. But I read some reviews of it, and it seems like it's very much just the same camera. Oh, you're sorting out the dice giveaway stuff. Yeah, that's going to be cool. As you probably know, I have quite a few dice somewhere downstairs. In total, about 2,500. No, but we're talking about cameras. So I looked up some reviews of the new version, because buying an old model of a camera and then finding out a few weeks later that, oh, here's the new version that is cheaper and a lot better. That's just not fun. But the reviews seem to point at it being mostly the same camera with a few minor improvements. And one of the reviews specifically said that if you already have one, you won't see any reason to upgrade to the Mark II. So I figured I could wait a bit and hope that it comes on sale, but I could also just get one today because they're still in stock, and the new Mark II is not being announced in Europe at the moment, or initially, which means that we'll have to wait a bit until we can actually get it. And I kind of expect what will happen is that the cameras will dry up like they did with the web cameras. Supposedly already difficult enough to get a hold of these things, because they have good use for web cameras as well. But I just figured, since one of the local stores actually had it in stock, why not just go pick one up? So I did. But then I figured that instead of messing around all afternoon doing a really poor job at setting it up and using something I'm not familiar with, I decided to just play with it for a while in my spare time when I'm not working or streaming. And then hopefully sometime next week I'll get a power adapter and it can actually run more than an hour or so, an hour and a half probably. So I also need to do some tests on that and the stability of it over time. If it gets too hot, if it shuts down, things like that. It shouldn't do, but I would really like to learn about that while not being live. So you're sorting out the dice stuff and you're trying to sort it out. We have several companies willing to sponsor us this time. Wow, that is great. it is so nice when companies actually take an active role, or at least go into sponsorships and so on. That was really, really great. Of course, it's going to be free advertisement for them. That's the main reason for doing it, but also just generally just supporting the hobby of role-playing games, board gaming, and anything dice related. So, one cult is done. So, yeah. So what else is new? When I started out this a few weeks ago, my foray into streaming, I'd actually planned on just streaming video games one night and painting on another night. But I found out that I'm not very good at chatting while I'm playing video games. I tend to just get sucked into the game, and I feel that would be a little bit too boring. So I'm gonna be painting all the time instead, which also suits me just fine because I really want to do a lot more painting than I do normally, and having these sessions here helps me find the motivation and take the time out of my calendar, which I tend to put way too many things in. So, but now I have Wednesday and Sunday evenings are fixed for this, just for a few hours. But that is still far better than what I used to do. So that's good. Now, at some point, I will also be, when I'm done with this faction here, I will begin working on my little crew for the game Malifaux, which I've also mentioned. It's basically a small skirmish game that's really fun, partly because of the completely crazy world they've thought up, but also because it deals a lot more with objectives than simply just shooting the opponent. And it's not just about keeping a control point or something like that. It's a lot more about placing markers in the right places. You have some hidden schemes that your opponent doesn't know about. So you may need to go and put some scheme markers in specific places on the board, or you may need to blow up some scenery or do other things, or you may just, because shooting each other is actually a part of it, or eating, devouring, doing other nasty stuff to your opponent's crew. You may just have it's called vendetta, I think the scheme is called, against one of the other models. So you specifically have to not just shoot it, but damage it a little bit, and then reveal that you have the vendetta before it dies completely. So you can, all these schemes, you can score either 1 or 2 victory points as you go along the game. So that requires quite a bit of thinking, actually, to get that up and running, and knowing your crew well enough to figure out which schemes are good for this crew. So in the beginning, you get a random drawing of schemes, and then you choose some. So you need to be able to say, okay, so I have this crew, and I'm playing against these people. Okay, then I cannot take this scheme because that's never going to work. Or you can go, wait, I need to definitely take this because that's going to be bloody brilliant. So, okay, cultist number 2 then. Hi, Emily. And you're lurking. Of course you are. Makes perfect sense. I guess you're busy doing a lot of other stuff around the house, or yeah, probably still working over there in the States. So, but today I want to talk a little bit about, again, role-playing games, because that is a lot on my mind these days. I love playing role-playing games. I've done it for more than 30 years. Doesn't mean I know anything. Doesn't mean you should listen to any of what I have to say. But I do have a lot of experience with this, and maybe some of this can give you some inspiration, give you some ideas. That would be wonderful. If not, well, then you know how not to do it. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit is something I talked to one of my players about a few days ago, because that group is put on a temporary break for a moment. And one of the reasons we did that is that we could only play once per month on weeknights, which means that it would only be a few hours. And to me, that just means that it will lose momentum rather quickly. Because the way I, as a game master, run my worlds or games, or well, our games, is that I tend to become the world, as pretentious as that might sound. But I play it like I would play a character if I was a player. So yeah, ranting in the title, yeah. Work, design prep. Well, I hope you have a good day's work ahead of you, Emily. I hope it's not as crappy. I hope it's good, I hope it's fun, and I hope it's over really soon so you can enjoy watching AJ and I guess Leland or Bill do scary stuff later today. No, but becoming the world and seeing it as a character that I play is something I've found to be really useful, because that means that whenever the players do something, what I do then is I kind of sort of respond to that in kind. I mean, they go someplace, I need to figure out, okay, so what happens over there in the world? What does the world do? Or they blow up a mountain. Let's say your players are two small, not very tall people who take this weird yellowish round thing and they go halfway across the world, throw it into a mountain, and then what should happen? I mean, should it just melt? That would be a little sort of anticlimactic. Does it blow up? That might seem a little bit excessive. But basically just figure out what it does. I mean, it doesn't mean to say that I do all of this without any kind of planning. Hey, Bill. But it means that I try to build my world, and then instead of doing a very specific list of things that happen, I kind of sort of give the world a personality that I get to know. So whenever something happens in the world that I don't control, i.e. whatever the players are doing, then I will suddenly have to say, okay, so if I was this world, what would I do then? And what I found that to accomplish is that it breaks a lot of the railroading or risk of railroading your characters around. I tried doing a lot of official modules for various role-playing games, and the looser they are, the better they work. But the modules where you have to make sure that your players go to this location and they have to talk to this person, I mean, it way too often what happened was just that the players would miss a clue, or I wouldn't be good enough at giving them clues, probably, or they just weren't interested. Modifian writes that, thank God you're not the GM for Forbidden Lands, that's the group Modifian and I are in, would have a bounty on our head for accidentally letting your pet demon burn the town down. Well, you probably would, but at the same time, I would never let you end up in a situation where you truly cannot do anything. I mean, having a bounty would make things so much more interesting, especially because this world is so loosely connected that we can basically just run to some other corner and of course mess things up there, and then run to a third corner and mess things up there, and then we would be running out of places to hide. And again, that would be, it's actually a really good example of what I'm saying. The situation was basically that we came across a loose demon. I didn't actually summon it, I just bound it to myself because I can do that with my little goblin. And then things got a little bit out of hand and we were very confused about who were actually good guys and bad guys, including ourselves. I still don't know if we're good guys or bad guys in this group. But oh, hey Charlotte, welcome to my rants. We're painting miniatures, we're talking about role-playing games. So, but back to Forbidden Lands. So we find this demon, we bind it to prevent it from doing more harm, but as demons are prone to do, it of course tricked its way a little bit out of my control anyway, and then I fell unconscious without having given the demon enough restrictions, and it just took off on its own and did did more fun stuff. Later on, back in the village, we called the demon down again, and because we didn't really know who was actually good guys or bad guys, we decided to just mess things up. It also helps a little bit that the goblin I'm playing has a dark secret that she wants to kill all humans. So setting loose a demon inside a mainly human village seemed like a good idea. And I still believe it was. Not even a good idea at the time, it was a really good idea. So that's what we did. But again, the world should have responded to that by doing something, and maybe it did. I mean, we just took off, so there may very well be a bounty on our head, Modivian, if we ever return to that village. I don't think we should. I think that would be pretty close to suicide, but still. These models are really, really difficult to color in completely. Have to go in through all the little what's called holes, openings, to actually get all of it. I'm also straying off camera here. So yeah, doing a little bit of that. Got a little bit too much here, just soak it up. No, so yeah, so I think we should actually have a bounty on our head in Forbidden Lands. What do you think, Modivian? Would that be completely unfair? You're open to Ral dying, but you don't want to kill him. So, yeah, again, that's just taking the choice of going back to the village would very much open us up to get killed. I think that would be really completely fair resolution if we ever did that. No, but again, the world part, as I said, I like to pretend that the world is a character that I'm playing. It's partly some stuff I've come up with on my own through experience, but it's also things I've seen in other places where it really makes sense to have the setting come to life. I remember in some of the behind the scenes talk on the Firefly DVDs way back. Firefly is a science fiction series about a group of characters flying around on a spaceship. And it's one of my favorite series. I've seen it so much that I don't really need to see it for a very long time. But it's got a bit of a cult status. You probably know it, or at least I've heard of it. But in some of the behind the scenes footage, they talk about the 7th character or whatever on the crew, and that is the ship itself. Because the ship, they've done a lot to make it come alive, including actually build the set in such a way that the entire ship is built. It's not different rooms, it's the entire ship, and they can move cameras around in it. So you don't have missing walls or non-connected rooms or stuff like that. So it's not like you have the kitchen in one room and then you have, well, the kitchen is in one room, but on one set, and then the engine room on another set, and they move everyone back and forth. You can actually do a full camera chase through the entire ship, and that makes it come alive really well. So they talk about the ship being a character and having personality and adding a lot to the series and to the show. And I think that ties in quite nicely with the concept of making your worlds become real. It also prevents, if you do it fairly well, it prevents the world becoming static whenever the characters are not around. You've seen that in role-playing games, I've seen it in books, I've seen it in movies or series, TV series. You go somewhere, you follow the main characters. They're running around doing stuff, and then when they get back to whichever village they came from, not much has changed. Or the big bad guy is almost about to do something really, really horrible and nasty, and then the group goes off on a wild goose chase somewhere and are sort of out of the loop and out of the sort of main story plot for 2 months, and when they return back, oh, everything is just like it should be. I think I've mainly seen this in computer games, I think I saw it a lot in Oblivion, where I didn't play that much of the main quest. I played a lot of the side quests for various reasons. And then when I got back to the main quest, it was still sort of like, oh, we're just about to die, or the evil is just about to spawn. And it had been like that, sort of in-game for weeks at that time. And it breaks the suspense of disbelief. It breaks the whole, this is a living world, this is the real world, our actions have consequences. And there's nothing more, well, there are a lot of more satisfying moments as a game master, but having the characters decide to go, oh, but this threat or this event is not important. We'll deal with that later. That can wait. And then when they come back expecting to complete this story arc, they just go, they'll just basically just tell them what happened. There's a new lord in the country, kingdom. The kingdom may not be a kingdom anymore. It's now a republic, whatever. And then they sit around going, oh, but we thought we could. Yeah, but you couldn't. So, cheers everyone. So, waiting around, or not waiting, but going elsewhere, shouldn't make the world stop. And people do this in a lot of different ways. Some people will do systems for keeping track of where everything is. Where all the different factions, where their armies are, where major key players in all of this go around, what happens. And that can be really useful, really powerful. Do a lot of notes on that, do mind mapping, all those things. I do that as well from time to time. But when deciding what the world should do in response to the player's actions, I tend to just try and become the world. And that's why one of the groups I was in, when we could only go down to playing about 2 to 3 hours once per month, I just had to say that just isn't enough for me. That's one of my limitations as GM, because I need to keep this world alive in my head to be able to play. I can't just bring out a bunch of notebooks, look them over, and keep playing. Well, yes, of course I could. I could always come up with something. But to really make the world function and make the world become alive and develop the world, I need to keep it running in my head. And that means I would be using a lot of time on this without ever actually really getting to play it, because we would have so short sessions that, yeah. So hopefully we'll pick it up again in about 6 months or so. I really hope we do. Mainly because I want to see what happens with the 2 player characters. They're really off to a good start. Really good role players, despite being completely new role players. But, you know, we'll see where it ends. So that was a little bit about how I run my worlds. But how do I build worlds? It's actually a really good question. I don't really have a system. I just come up with ideas. Some of them blatantly stolen from other people or settings, books, movies, whatever. Draw inspiration from wherever you can. As long as you don't publish anything, you should be in the clear. The usual disclaimer right there. Other than that, what I do when creating worlds, I like to get, if I have some kind of specific theme, or maybe just an event. One example of this is the first time I joined in the NaNoWriMo project, which I know for a fact that Modifian knows. If you others don't know it, go look it up. But for NaNoWriMo, I just had this idea for a story about a small event, just a few minutes, and I wanted to explore, what is this? Why did this happen? Who is this person, and who's this person they're talking to? All of those things just popped into my head, and eventually it's over the years turned into, I think, about 120,000 words or so in total of unedited really terrible grammar, but I've been told it's quite entertaining. But that idea was quite simply a guy showing up at the gates to the afterlife. Whatever you call it in your world is probably a world with multiple religions and pantheons. So there's going to be a lot of different ways of dealing with death in this. But one thing they all have in common, all these people, no matter what belief they have, is that they die. So they move on to whatever. Some of them may not move on if they're atheists, so they just disappear, but that's still a transition. Also, this was all the cultist done, so we'll continue on the undeads. So the people here, they have a lot of different gods. That's always the most fun, and I like to take inspiration from the polytheistic civilizations, like the old Norse gods or Greek, Roman religion. I think Persia, you can also always get a lot of fun from that ancient Persia, the ancient Egyptian gods. Wonderful stuff, really interesting stories in that. But also in this world, to get back to the point here, this guy shows up at the gates to the afterlife, whatever, and is turned away. And that was the only idea I had in my head, because it just spawned so many questions I wanted answered. He's not allowed to enter the afterlife. I mean, he's not immortal, obviously, because he has arrived at the gates, so he must have died out in the physical world. And that's got to be painful. But then he's just turned away, and not in a good way. And he also knows this because he retains his consciousness. All these things just began to evolve inside my head while I was thinking about it. And then just sat down and started with that scene. And he had a nice talk with what turned out to be one of two dragons that was waiting around. One of them is slightly neurotic dragon that's really nervous whenever this guy shows up, because they have to turn him away, but they know he really doesn't want to be turned away, and they can't do anything about him because he's already dead, and he can't really do much about them because they're dragons, they're guarding the gates to the afterlife. What are you going to do about him? It turns out that this idiot, what he does is he picks up a rock and starts throwing it at one of the dragons and hitting it right on the snout. So they have a nice little chat, and they just need to spend the usual few moments until they just somehow he's dumped back into the real world again. And from there the plot just evolved, because where did he wake up? And who is he? Well, who killed him this time around? I think he actually did he get shot or did he get poisoned? I can't even remember. It was back in 2007 or something like that. So it's been a few years. But basically it just grew on me, and I wrote a lot of stuff about it, and then the world came because I had to describe where he was, and then I needed to do a little work on that as well. But since most of this was just done as part of these writing projects once per year over 2 or 3 years, it really just meant that I didn't think about it in between writing sessions, once per year. So bringing that up after a year of not having worked on it meant that it was really, really hard to get back into that kind of thinking and remembering all the things, looking through my notes for who's who in this world and where are people, where should they go, all those things. And that's why I prefer to keep some kind of momentum in my worlds, if that makes sense. So they remain alive inside my head and not just become notes on a piece of paper, because then it somehow becomes knowledge that I have to remember rather than a living being that I can keep alive and that I can explain and I can see it react to what other people are doing to it. So, one undead done. So yeah. So, but with this group going on a break, I've had a sad month really, because another group also was put on hold. That's the Forbidden Lands group. Again, because our GM and his wife, who's also a player in the group, are having a baby basically any moment now. I don't know, Modifian, have you heard anything from them? I tried stalking them a little bit on Facebook, but couldn't see any news earlier when I checked. But I'm hoping they get the little baby soon, because it's gone over time with what, 8-10 days. So yeah. But I'm sure it will be fine when it gets here. Incidentally, Emily, if you're listening, you may find it somewhat interesting that their nickname for the baby is actually Sparky. Yeah, so Sparky. But we hope Sparky arrives anytime soon. Also, but again, so for obvious reasons, this group is on hold and will be for quite a while. I'm also with the same people. I'm playing Gloomhaven, so that is also obviously on hold for a while. We may be able to get in a game or two, because Gloomhaven is not a game where I feel like it needs to be kept alive. It's a board game. It's not a role-playing game. I don't get to take choices where I really decide what happens. It is usually, apart from the whole combat simulation, it's just here is an event that's happened. Do you choose option A or do you choose option B? So it's as simple as that. So I don't need to keep that alive. I don't need to keep my character living inside my brain, because it's not a role-playing game. It's a board game. It's numbers on paper and all that. We could of course sit around and talk in appropriate voices for our small miniatures and all that stuff. We do try to play it a little bit along the lines of what is this kind of character doing? Is it but that's more sort of this is an aggressive character, this is a melee, this is ranged DPS. So we have the classic, I guess, MMO or board gamey classes or roles. It's probably a better word. So we have different roles to fulfill, not roles as in role-playing games, not as in personality, but as in you're a tank, you're a ranged DPS, you're a melee DPS, you're a support, you're a healer, and so on. And I think it's a great game for that. It does it really well. I like the fact that there are no dice roll. No, there are no dice roll. You draw from a modifier deck. I just remembered we had a lot of dice on the board, but that's to keep track of hit points and so on. And not having the dice means that you can see, you know what's in your deck, and you know which cards have already been drawn. That gives you a lot of information about what the odds are and the statistics. Whereas if you always roll a die, you can have a really crappy night where you draw nothing or roll nothing but ones. I've tried that especially in games like the various Warhammer kinds, and then it's just not fun, not even for your opponent. And you can have other games where you only roll sixes and you hit everything you shoot, and that's actually also becomes, to me at least, not very fun. And again, for your opponent, usually not fun. So having a modifier deck and drawing cards from that, and only shuffling it at either if you go all the way through or at certain events or whatever, means that you have to take into account that you have drawn all your good modifiers. Then you need to expect that you draw really poorly from now on, or vice versa. Or if it's an even spread, you may be down to okay, so I have 2 modifiers left. One is a clean miss and the other is a critical hit. Then you're down to a 50-50, and that can be exciting and fun. So, do I ever get paint in your beard? Not that I've noticed, but I don't have a mirror, so I can't really see. But considering the fact that I often use my fingers to wipe off paint, and I always do this, stroke my beard, I'm sure I've got... where do you come from? I'm sure I've got a lot of paint in my beard from time to time. yeah, no. But with all these groups shutting down, I've really been looking to find something else to do, because if I go 6 months without really playing role-playing games, that's gonna be hard. The last group I'm in is a D&D 3.5, which is not shutting down, fortunately, but one of the guys is actually moving to the other side of the country this weekend. And that's a bit of a bummer, so we'll try keeping him on through web camera, and hopefully that works. But if it doesn't, we're going to be down 1 player. We're going to be down to 3 players, which can work quite nicely. But he's also one good role-playing character, and we've just gotten the group started and off to a really good start. Oh, highlights in my beard. Well, I kind of sort of have that since I have so much gray in it. But yeah, I could do some highlights. But not with yellow. I should paint it. If I were to paint my beard, what color should it be? Oh no. Helene is sharing with the Discord house. She cannot do stuff like that. I mean, then this would no longer be exclusive for you. Oh dear. I think we're gonna need to have a serious talk with Helene at some point. What do you think? Oh, Bluebeard. Actually, fun story about the beard. Well, not my beard, someone else's beard. One of the other Danish miniature streamers, or painting streamers, his nickname is Bloodbeard. So I guess he's already taken the red. But yeah, Bluebeard. Yeah, privacy in a public forum. I don't get it either. That should just be a given. So, but yeah, Bluebeard might be an idea. I should talk to my barber next time I go see her. If she knows anything about painting beard, or if she's just gonna look at me like I'm a complete lunatic and just go, "You are not painting your beard or dyeing your beard." So I don't know. Rainbow sparkles. About 2 years ago, my nephew actually gave me some Christmas baubles with lights in it that are specifically meant to go in beards. Unfortunately, since it was from Flying Tiger, it didn't really work. There was some kind of glitch, so even though we got replacement batteries and all that, they just didn't work, and I didn't feel like opening it up, trying to fix it and all that. So I have it somewhere, so I could fix it, I guess. But yeah. Oh, Ellie. Ellie is Modifian's daughter, and kind of, sort of, I like to think of her as my niece, if that's okay with you. So yeah. So listening to what colors she likes is actually really important. So you're saying purple, blue, and yellow. And I will always forever be Auntie S. Yes, that is a very long story as to why I'm not an uncle but an aunt. And it is not what people would usually think. It is far more sinister than that, and deals with world-spanning plots and secret organizations and what have you. So I haven't mentioned that I'm also really good at coming up with silly ideas on the spot. It comes from having a group of players who seem to take honor in destroying plots. Yeah, you can't remember the story. Oh, I know I've told you, and I will not tell it here, not yet anyway, but if you think a little bit about what I just said, I think you'll be able to at least guess part of where it comes from. That should be appropriately annoying for everyone else who's listening in. So yeah. So that's just me being silly as usual. No, but I like Ellie. She's a good kid. She's what, 3? 4? She's 4 by now. So that's a great age. And I don't get to see you much because of all the corona shutdown and life being what it is and all of us being what we are and so on. It's 2.5. Well, I'm an amazing aunt. I give her way too much credit. Make her older than she is, which is fine. It's perfectly fine. I'll just start, when I start teaching her how to brew and drink meat. I guess she can start when she's about, 11? Shouldn't be a problem. So yeah. We are getting some work done on the undeads now. Actually, the guy I'm painting these for, him and some other people should have played Cthulhu Wars today. But they couldn't because one of them had to cancel. Then there were only 2. But if you can write that Ellie is a mad scientist, yeah. You can't blame me for Ellie being a mad scientist. I take offense at that. I had hoped to have at least a little bit of influence on her in that respect. But yeah. No, but they were supposed to play Cthulhu Wars tonight, and since I had this faction and one of the other guys who's painting has some of the others, they were going to throw these 2 fairly new guys who haven't played it a lot. We're going to make them play some of the more advanced factions, which would be really fun. And when I say that they're new players, they're new to the game. They are very much experienced and in many ways quite hardcore and really good players to play against, mainly because they are so good. I always find that it's most fun to play against people who are better than yourself. That way you learn a lot. YouTube gets influenced, but I have a YouTube account. I have 3 YouTube accounts. The question is, why don't you follow those? What do you think? And I'm sure it means that Corona means that no one gets any influenza, except they do. Actually, the regular flu is going to be interesting to see with all the quarantine and the shutdowns and social distancing. It'll be really interesting to see how the normal winter diseases like the common cold or the regular flu, how's that is going to be spreading or maybe not spreading so much. Guess we'll show. Oh, and you suddenly got busy looking up YouTube accounts. Well, I can discreetly let you know that it is basically just called Skjelm. And it will just, it's not the one I use when I actually watch YouTube, so it doesn't really have a lot of that. I just use it as a place to dump off all the streams from here, because since I just started out on Twitch, they only remain on Twitch for 14 days or so. And I kind of want to keep them around just for posterity, for my own sake, really. So if you could, Twitch has an export option for YouTube, so why not use it? I mean, then they can sit over there and take up space somewhere, take up disk space in cyberspace someplace. So, yeah. Oh, and by the way, as you probably noticed, I managed to rearrange my desk a little bit, so I no longer have the lamp straight in front of my face, which is kind of nice. I mean, the other one was helpful a bit because it didn't feel as exposed and visible, which means a lot to me on a personal level. But yeah. So what else should we talk about? Let's maybe say a little bit about what these creatures are used for in Cthulhu Wars. The undead that we're painting now, they're mainly running around with the elder one called the King in Yellow. And I'm not entirely up to speed with the lore behind Hastur and his followers. That was the second time I said it this stream. You say it 3 times, it's supposed to show up. This being 2020, I have a feeling that he's already here, someplace. And you like the music. Yeah, as I've said a couple of times and will keep saying often, is that it's music made by a German musician called Adrian von Ziegler. And he makes this really good, some of it is slightly sinister, some of it has a lot of Celtic inspiration, but really good for background music, instrumental all the way through. A lot of changes from album to album. Some of it is a little bit more upbeat, high-paced, actiony. Some of it is really nice and quiet. So, yeah. I need to, at some point, I should support him on Patreon. I feel guilty for not already doing that. But yeah. What do I? Have I actually? I think I actually have done that by now. Can't remember. But the King in Yellow, when he shows up, he runs around the map of the world which you play on in Cthulhu Wars, and he desecrates all the different areas, because that's what they do. They destroy living things, they destroy life. And even for you die-hard Jurassic Park fans who say stuff like life will find a way and so on, no it won't. Not when the Elder Gods have been here. Then it's all downhill. Nothing good going on after that. So the King in Yellow runs around, desecrates the area, and every time he's desecrated, he can call forth a monster. And usually that will be, at least in the beginning of the game, these undeads. Because whenever he moves, well, he has a special move action where he and all his undead followers can move really cheap. So you don't have to spend a lot of your power points doing that. So that's why you always get these monsters into play when you have the King in Yellow on the board. They're basically just running all over the place, desecrating half the world, and that's all fun. So the King in Yellow, we have him here. He's pretty buff, nice abs, great buns, the cape, and again the tentacle coming out of his back and his head and all that. It's got lots of skulls all over the place. Basically, if it comes to combat with this guy, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't fight. He's just boring like that. But that's not his purpose in the game. So yeah. The other things we'll get to pretty soon are someone, I can't remember what they're called, Bahik, something like that. They just fly around. They're pretty good in combat. They kill stuff all the time. And we'll also at some point, and I left these intentionally on my small spray board. These are the desecration markers, and this is actually the yellow sign, Hastur's sign. You see, it's a nice 3D effect. It's actual. When you put these on the board, it's not like you're just putting a small cardboard token. You put something large. I mean, you've desecrated Scandinavia. Why would you leave just a small, insignificant little piece of cardboard when you've desecrated an entire, well, not continent, but several countries? No, you need something big. You need something visible. You need something that just shows that you've been there. So. Oh, and Charlotte, thank you for the follow. I did not notice that when you did. I appreciate it. It all helps. And that way you will get notifications whenever I go online to stream. But as I said, I'll be streaming Wednesdays and Sundays at 7 o'clock CET in the evening, not in the morning, crazy people. And I hope to keep it up for a long time. I enjoy it. I enjoy just random chatting like we do now. So yeah. So what else is up with people? So, not much. People are really quiet in chat today. Guess people are just lurking. That's perfectly fine. I just hope you enjoy listening to me rambling on about these things. That's the common theme for this for this channel. So now we're going back to the role-playing groups and all that. Fortunately, my old regular group, of which some are actually in. Oh yeah, you're working. And Bonifian said you bought a water fountain for your cats to ignore. Yep, not one cat has drunk from it. That is what I experienced when I got one for my kitties as well. It was an attempt to get them to drink more and play a little bit more and all that, and they just didn't. I didn't once see them actually drink. They were, when I put it up, they went there to look at it, batted it a little bit with the tiny paws, and that was it. I still think I have it down in the basement somewhere, which may come in handy when I hopefully soon get my arson gear. And yeah, they loved the sink. I don't have them anymore. I don't know about you, Modifin. Do your cats actually drink from the sink, or have you been wise enough to not let them do that ever? So, no, but anyway, I've decided to get cats again because it's something I miss having them around. And as much as it broke my heart when I lost the two other ones over a fairly short period of time, about a year and a half between, it's just gone so quiet around the house without them. And as annoying as they can be, Stella loves to drink from running water for hours if you let her. And I bet that half the time she's just standing there looking at it, going, where does this water come from? Where is it going? I don't care, because I'm a cat. I don't have to care about anything. No, but getting cats again will be really, really nice. I look forward to that. And there are of course several options. I have not talked to anyone specifically yet. My nephew got some cats from a local breeder down in the southern part of the country. And they are Maine Coons. They're really beautiful, really well socialized. Oh, and Ellie is also. Yeah, no, Modifian, we've been over this. I do not want one of your cats. I would not ever do that to you. I know how much you love them, and I know you're just doing this to be sweet. But no, I could never do that to you. I would never take your cats from you. Now, what we moved on to here is the High Priest, which you can get in any faction, and is basically a very advanced cultist. For all intents and purposes, well, most intents and purposes, he works like a normal cultist. But he's a lot more expensive, but that's because you can, at any given point, as a reaction to what the other people are doing, you can sacrifice him to get a little bit more power, which can bring you back into the game when you would normally not have anything left to do in a specific round. You can sacrifice him, get a few power points, and then you can do stuff again. And we're not talking about power points from Microsoft. He does not walk around making slides for you. Don't go there. Don't not even go there. No, So here's actually an expansion that was made for the game, and Sandy Peterson, who made the game, is supposed to say that he was a little sad that it didn't include it in the base game, because it adds that extra bit of not randomness. That's what I'm looking for here. Not randomness. It's unpredictability, perhaps, or flexibility, in the sense that normally you just spend your power, and when you're out of power, you can't do anything for the rest of the round. And that means that people who sit around and cling to their power, they'll be the ones ending the turn, and they can do things without people responding to it. And that is a really good strategy, because then you basically have free run of the entire map. The sleeper fraction, hint being that they're called sleepers, can do that. Then it basically just go not doing anything at the moment. Other factions cannot do that. If you ever say, oh, I'm doing nothing, you lose the rest of your power, and that's it for the round for you. But the sleeper is actually built around the concept of waiting, not doing anything for a long time, and then when other people have spent their power, then the sleeper awakens and does a lot of bad shit to people. And if you cannot respond to that, it can get really frustrating. However, if you can respond to it by, say, sacrificing your high priest, then all of a sudden the sleeper needs to think a little bit more about, do I really want to sleep, and do I really want to do that? Because this guy was one of my opponents here. He's got he has this high priest, so he can actually waken him up. Or maybe he just goes, yeah, maybe the people I'm doing this against don't have a high priest, but one of the other factions does. And then all of a sudden Cthulhu jumps back into the game, goes from his submerged state with all his troops, jumps up and kills off the people I left behind because I was going to kill someone else. So it adds that extra bit of strategy to the game, which I really enjoy. So I would not want to play without the high priests. I think that's a really, really good addition to the game, and I agree that it shouldn't have been an addition, it should just have been in the game. So yeah. I know, Modifian, doesn't seem like you have any takers for a neurotic crazy cat. I've had my fill of those for a long time to come. That being said, I'm bound to get crazy cats. I find it hard to believe that whatever cats I end up with are not crazy. So that's one high priest done. Just need to soak up a little bit of the excess paint. And again, for those watching who are thinking, why are you just painting these yellow? That's really boring. That's really dull. Why don't you do a lot of details? Why don't you dot in the eyes? Why don't you do a proper paint job? Make the miniature nice. And that's because this was actually our birthday gift to my friend who has the game, and was to just use the contrast paints to make them pop a little bit more when they're on the board. I mean, all of these different factions come in colored plastic. You can see on the bottom of these ones here, this is yellow. Not surprising, we have the yellow sign, so of course it's yellow. That's also why I'm using the yellow contrast paint. But we wanted to do something so when you look at them and they're just sitting on the table, you can see the highlights. You can see the actual details of the model stand out a bit more at a distance. And you can do that if you use, for instance, the contrast paint. You can use a normal paint job, use washes and shades and glazes, all different things. I found that the contrast paints work really well for this because it's fast, it's easy to apply them. They're a bit costly. You could, at less than half the cost, blend your own, but at the same time then you'd have to reblend them if you ever need more. And are you going to get the ratios right? Are you going to be able to find the correct medium and all those things? So just buying them, using them more or less straight from the pot, thin them down a little bit if you feel like it, works really well. Cheers. So let's move on to the monsters. And now these ones are going to be really annoying to paint because you can see all these parts in here gonna be really difficult to actually reach with a paintbrush. Well, maybe not so much on this one here, but when I painted the sleeper faction, a lot of the miniatures for the monsters there, really difficult to get all the way in, and it annoys me because you can see that it is darker. You can still see some of the white base coat priming, but I just couldn't get the brush in all the small, what I call nooks and crannies, I don't know, all the small narrow little bits and pieces of the model. So if you look really closely at those models, it's not that pretty. But again, this is speed painting. I'm going for just over an hour. I've already painted 12 miniatures, so I don't spend a lot of time. I actually spend way too much considering what I'm doing, but that's because I'm chatting and because I'm not a very fast painter. I know people who can actually paint miniatures with an actual paint job, different colors and all that, at the same speed that I'm painting these ones here, which I've always found completely amazing that they can do, but no, I'm not even gonna try that. Probably could back in high school, but can't anymore. I'm old and I'm not lazy. The Danish word would be malig. I like to just relax and take my time doing these things and just not rush it too much. Haste makes waste and all that. Still no takers, Modifian. I think you may need to work a little bit on your advertising skills. But so I can see we have some new viewers coming in. Feel free to say hi in chat. Feel free to ask any questions. Feel free to give me clues about what you want me to rant about next. Otherwise, I'll just come up with something. You're old and settled. Nah, not so much settled. I'm just comfortable, comfy. I like to be comfy. I don't like to have the stress of going, oh, I only have 3 minutes per miniature. I have to paint faster. Let's go, Mal. It'll take whatever time it takes, and I'll be finished at some point. Yeah, comfy is good, Emily. Comfy is good, and comfy is what you get when you brew your own meat and drink it and just relax and enjoy yourself. Which reminds me that I really need to go pick up some yeast killer and some clearing stuff for the yeast, for the meat. I've had sitting in the bucket for a month too long now. It doesn't go bad from sitting there. If anything, it becomes better, but I need to tap it into bottles so I can drink it. Although I did joke a little bit with one of my friends that we should just get some nice long straws and just drink, find an evening and just drink all of it in one go. Just start from one end, probably the top, I would guess, and just drink all of it till it's gone. It'll be 25 liters of meat in one sitting. That would probably kill us. Not only because of the alcohol, but I think drinking 25 liters, 12, 13 liters of fluid in a single evening, wouldn't that completely mess up your system? I don't know. What does Modifian write? Settled means comfy. You go at your own pace. A man who is old and settled is the man pottering around in his workshop, rocking on the front porch, humming to himself while he shuffles about in the garden. Okay, for me, again, from the way things are, the words and how I translate them in my head to Danish terms, I get settled as you have ground to a halt. You've stopped evolving. You've stopped developing yourself. You're settled at the bottom of the ocean, and you're never going to move anywhere. So that's why I figured that settled would be wrong. But I mean, the other one, just puttering around doing this and that, I mean, that's what I do. Like, you've known me for how many years? 10 years? So Pretty much things. Think you, you know, that's me. But yeah. See, now here we have one of the things a little tricky to reach the inside of his rear legs. I mean, I can get to this part here, but my brush doesn't bend, not all the way like that. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to be scratching off the paint I've already done. So I should actually have started with the lowest lying parts, but who cares? Again, since it's just a simple job with contrast paints, it doesn't really matter if I scratch the surface a little bit and just paint over it again. It's not like I'm messing up highlights or anything like that. Not that I do good highlights. I mean, for those of you who were here when I painted the blink dogs last time, you know that while I can make something that looks a little bit like highlights, I'm definitely not good at it. That just means I have to practice. This is starting to annoy me, but it has to be done. Well, has to and has to. I've decided that it must be done, therefore it has to be done. This is a free choice that I'm slightly regretting. Okay, Modifian, you mentioned something about the old man teaching the grandchildren to do model rockets. Now, I'm not ever going to have grandchildren, fortunately. So I'm just going to have to teach other kids how to do model rockets. And why stop at models? I mean, why not just teach Ellie to do proper rockets? I mean, she mentioned that she's already got the mad scientist stuff going for her. So why not take it one step further and teach her how to use, how to build all the things she'll need to take over the world? I think that makes perfect sense. Now the thing to remember with the contrast paints is that as long as it hasn't dried on the miniature, you can actually still push it around, you can paint over it, you can fix up if you're missing something. But once it starts to dry, and especially when it's half dried, it's really, really important that you don't start putting your brush in it, because then it gets kind of, I don't know if gooish is the right term for it, but it gets a little sort of rubbery. So if you start trying to fix it and trying to go, oh, I can just add a little bit more here, if you do it while it's sort of half dried, you're likely to just make it either come off in small flakes or just leave really bad brush strokes. So that's why I'm not returning really to the top of the model, because that one is drying up at the moment. I'm just working my way down, and some of these legs here I probably shouldn't fix up yet, but it's on the not so visible side of it. Sorry about keep pushing the camera around. It is literally in my face at the moment. Which is also why I want to have the other camera up. I also need to get a good tripod for it. Zoom angle. Slightly tacky. Yep, exactly. It gets tacky. Like that. Now the really, really annoying part will be when I have to do the base, and I have to paint these areas in here, when I have to paint them gray down on the base without covering the yellow bits. That's gonna be fun. That will not be today though. That's gonna be another time, probably, maybe Sunday. I don't know, depends on how my weekend goes. As mentioned, a friend of mine is moving to the other end of the, not the other end of the country, but he is moving to Jutland, which is by Danish standards far away, and I have decided I wanted to help him move. Not in any kind of, I want to make sure he actually leaves the island kind of way, but just to make sure he actually gets to his new home safely and all that. He's been painting stuff over there, painting walls and all that for the past couple of weeks, doing a great job of it. But he needs someone to go with him this weekend, and well, that's me. Why don't I do the grey first? It's too hard to cover the white plus yellow after. Yes, it is a little. The grey, when I'm doing those, they're not transparent. But yes, the opacity of the contrast paint would really suffer, and maybe it might make sense to do the grey first. But when you put on the contrast paint, you have to use so much paint that it will eventually seep down onto the base, and I guess then you need to cover it up. And of course, the places that would where you had the most seepage, whatever, would be these hard to reach spots, like the one down here, in there. So even though if I had already painted it grey, the yellow would seep down, and maybe it would come off better like that. That is worth exploring, actually. I could do that. Why don't we just do it? Do it. No point in overthinking or postponing or anything like that. And so yeah, let's do the grey first and see how that goes. Also, this very lovely glass was a gift from a friend of mine, and I had it pretty close to 25 years. I've dropped it on hardwood floors twice without it breaking. That's good quality. So, YOLO. So this is going to be really boring to look at because it's going to be the grey, but I'm going to switch to a slightly thinner brush to get into the creases. It's Coke. It's a bit of Coke, you heathen. It is Coca-Cola, but I have drunk Jolly Cola from it, and I remember doing a Facebook post saying something along the lines of that I'm definitely going to hell for doing that. So, but if you're now painting this grey, and it's all your fault if it doesn't work. Well, it is gonna work, but let's see how it goes. Jolly Cola is a tasty hell. It is. I cannot drink it. I cannot drink a lot of it because it actually becomes too sweet for me. As ironic as I know that sounds, I have a very sweet tooth. But there's something about the taste and the way it's flavored that's just not necessarily sugary sweet, but just like the way vanilla can be too sweet, or give a sweet finish to whatever you put it in. It's the same with some of these non-Coca-Cola, Pepsi brand colas. And I actually think that it's because they really do taste like cola should taste, but that's not what I'm accustomed to. And I am, if nothing else, a creature of habit. Drinking too much soda is my vice, and in many ways I wish it wasn't, but there could be so many worse things I could put into my body. So what are you writing? Hashtag influencer. Oh, you want a Coke? I'm sorry, what if you get that chicory? What does chicory mean? What if you? I don't believe I've seen that. I'm guessing it has nothing to do with chickens. And yeah, of course, when I say Coke or Coca-Cola, I mean the kind with sugar in it, because that is what I prefer. I don't believe in any of these weird stories that people talk about with aspartame that gets when it is broken down into the body, it creates formaldehyde, and it's sort of like, yeah, it kind of does, but in so insanely small doses that it doesn't really matter. But some people will just grab hold to the fact that one specific, completely irrelevant. I mean, formaldehyde is very poisonous to the body, but it's in so small quantities that it shouldn't really matter anyway. But people don't look at the entire picture of that. They just go, it creates formaldehyde, it must be bad. So like, okay, but it really isn't. So then you have the, what is the word for it these days? QAnon, whatever. Artificial sweeteners make your stomach upset. Oh, in many ways I'm glad to hear that, because that means you don't eat them or get them. I've had some stomach problems when I had a long period where I actually tried switching to Coca-Cola Zero. Never really liked the taste of it, and if I drink too much of it, yeah, my stomach gets upset as well. I don't know if it's because sugar is, I will not say more natural, because it kind of isn't, it's processed sugar. But it might just be easier on the stomach, and maybe I'm just drinking too much. So yeah. So almost all the way around with the base on this one, but I think it needs a second coat. And again, that is something I never learned back in the 90s, which I'm in many ways really sad that I didn't learn back then. It is that you should always thin your paint. You should never ever just take directly from the pot. And so the question becomes, why am I then doing it straight from the pot here? Well, that is because of two things. One thing is that what you cannot see here is that I'm actually just slightly dipping my brush in some almost clean, or at least slightly gray water, rather than doing a completely dry brush. But also because I have cheated and actually thinned down all the paint in this pot, because this is the pot I'm using for this paint project, and I figured I'm going to use so much of this that I don't want to mess around with bringing paint out of the pot onto a palette, a wet palette, and then thinning it down, hoping that I hit the correct consistency, and going through all of that all the time. I figured I'm going to pour in some matte medium, I think I used, and some distilled water to avoid getting too many interesting microorganisms into it, and just pour it straight into the pot, shook it up fiercely, and now I have a far thinner paint here than you'll usually find in the Citadel pots. And on that note, if anyone from Citadel would ever actually come across this, please consider using dropper bottles for your paints. I love the consistency, and I actually really love the quality of the paints. I've never had problems with Citadel paints separating. I have that with a lot of the other brands. But getting it from these pots onto a wet palette involves scooping it up with a brush or other similar tool and dumping it on the palette and wasting a lot of paint. And I think that's just, it's sad really. And if you have unlimited resources on unlimited supply of paint, yeah, then I guess you wouldn't really worry too much about it. And to be honest, I don't think I've ever actually emptied any kind of paint pot completely. I've never used up an entire pot in my life, so it's not like I'm running out of paint on a frequent basis. It's just that it feels so wrong. Also, I don't know if you can hear it, but it sounds like someone's either doing fireworks outside or maybe dragging a really stubborn suitcase over the pavement down on the street. So a lot of strange crackling noises. So, but yeah, thinning paints, really good idea. That's also why we need to give it a second coat of paint, because the thin paints don't cover as much, so you don't really get the right color you want in the first go. Because if you thin it down, you get fewer pigments per surface area, whatever. But on the other hand, since it thinned down, it will spread a lot easier. You won't get sort of lumps. I get a little bit. It's not thinned, really not thinned far enough for this one, but it's for this purpose it is fine. If you take too thick paint, what will happen is that it will actually block out the details of the model. Now, all the small recesses will get filled up with the many small pieces of small pieces. That's complete rubbish. The pigments in the paint will clutter up the miniature, whereas if you thin it down, you'll get fewer pigments, you'll get less color, but then you just do a second coat and you will still get fewer pigments than if you used the unthinned paint. I guess, more or less, right there, you get the point. But you will still get good coverage on the after the second layer. Sometimes you may want to go for a third layer as well. Depends a lot on the color, the pigments, the brand of paint, and so on. So yeah, I wish I'd learned that back in the 90s, because when I learned it and started getting seriously back into painting, which wasn't actually really until a year or two ago, and I've not having nearly enough time to actually paint. It was very much like having to relearn everything all over. I was used to just slapping on paint as precisely as I could, doing a shade, doing a dry brush, and that was it. That was how I painted miniatures. It works quite nicely, and if you're painting, I did a large part of my dwarf army for Warhammer Fantasy Battle back then. If you're doing 20 miniatures, pretty much like like we're doing here, but you're actually doing colors and you're doing a color scheme for the uniforms and all that, then you really don't want to spend more time than necessary, and no one's going to be looking too closely at the models anyway, also because I did not paint them to enter into any kind of competition, not even the hey look, I have a painted army competition. So yeah, so painting has I think it's also evolved a lot since the early days. But back when I learned it, there were no YouTube videos. There were no, and this is not one of these, when I was young, things were so much better, or this was a lot harder for me, or blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. This is, if anything, that's just me being jealous of people who come into the hobby, the miniature painting hobby today, and go on YouTube and watch wonderful tutorials and just sit down and get stunning results because they get a really good guided tour, whereas I have to unlearn 20-25 years of bad habits. So, but I think it's really cool, and I think it's fantastic what people are doing in terms of tutorials, both advanced and beginners tutorials. So many good resources out there. And I think also that, as we've established, I am an old man, which means that the things I have learned are what I fall back on, and the things that when I need to learn new things, it's gotten a little harder over the years. So trying to learn completely new painting techniques is not as easy for me as it was when I was a teenager, which is why I wish I'd learned it back then. But that's a different rant. Now, this is almost done. There's some in Danish, when you're painting, for instance, your living room, or basically painting anything, and you miss some spots. We call those spots holidays. I don't know if it's called that in English as well. Perhaps one of you brilliant people can enlighten me on that. So you'll look at a spot and say, oh, there's a small holiday, and you'll paint it over. And it's in so common use that when I had my flat painted a year ago, I actually just afterwards, because there were some places where they had missed some spots, I just called up the people who did it and said, oh, there are some holidays, and he just, oh, sure, send us some pictures. Stevia, yeah, I tried the Coca-Cola brand that came out with part sugar and part stevia, and that actually seemed to work really, really well. I like the taste of that, and it is a lot less strong compared to aspartame. It's called a fuck up. You fucked up. Paint over the fuck up. Now, Marifian, why am I not surprised that you would use words like that? Here in this very civilized channel with... No, wait. It's my channel. Can't be civilized. Yeah, exactly, Bill. They did some... I think it was called Coca-Cola Life. And I can't remember if it was only stevia or whatever. But it... Compared to Coca-Cola Zero, I really preferred that. But I haven't seen it over here for a really long time. So I'm guessing it never really caught on. So on to the second layer paint. Now when painting with the acrylics paint, like all this is, the normal paint here as compared to the contrast paints, they dry a lot faster, partly because it's a very different kind of paint, but also because I pour on a fairly thick layer of contrast paint, which means that there's a lot of excess water, fluid, so on, that needs to dry. And that's why I batch paint all of this instead of just doing one model at a time. Well, I also do the batch paint because batch painting makes sense when you're painting that many miniatures similarly. AJ, you're drinking Diet Pepsi. Is that called Pepsi Max where you come from? Diet Pepsi. I am saddened by the concept. Also, in many ways, kind of saddened at the concept of calling any kind of soda diet, because even though, yeah, there may not be any calories in it, diets are generally thought to be healthy things, and soda really isn't. As a co-worker of mine who actually drank Pepsi Max all the time, he referred to it as cans of acid. Dave, you're up. Good morning. You drink diet, you find stevia awful, but my taste buds are screwed. Well, not much to do. If your taste buds are screwed, then yeah, what are you gonna do? Well, you're hopefully gonna go with whatever you like and whatever you prefer to drink. I am not here to tell you that what you shall and shall not do. That is entirely up to yourself. That is up to you to follow your own path in life. And you have to follow your own path in life. That does make sense. Oh, so you're also lurking, Dave. Well, I hope you have a really good Thursday in your end of the world, Dave. I think it's really cool that we can sit here and actually have people from quite literally all over the world. I think we may be missing, if we get some people from North Korea or whatever, then it would be really cool. The other day we had a guy from Chile dropping by, or Chile, as he said it was more correctly pronounced where he's from. They are from, I don't know if it was a man, woman, non-gender. I don't know. Could be a bot for all I know. The bots are taking over one Twitch channel at a time. We'll probably find out that stevia causes cancer in a decade or two. We might, Bill, but the way things are going, we might not find out because none of us are going to be here in a decade or two anyway, with the world and the climate going to hell and various countries that shall not be named being on the verge of civil war again, and things just rapidly deteriorating all over. That's really sad. So yeah. That is absolutely true. This is Cheery Thoughts. I used to, back in university, my university days, I used to say that I was super pessimistic, which was a good thing, because I'm so pessimistic about everything that I can only be positively surprised. I mean, I expect the worst all the time. So when the worst doesn't happen, I'm just pleasantly surprised. I am so yeah, exactly. Oh, hey, Bill Ben is here as well. And oh, AJ, you're trapped in an elevator. Let me guess, you were going for pad 3 to get to your ship. I said that was more grey. You're a new Babbage. What? Natural means it's not a chemical. Now that brings me to a little bit of a pet peeve I have, because what actually is a chemical? Isn't most things chemicals? Or at least based in chemistry. May not be, it may be naturally occurring in nature, but where are the bounds of nature? I mean, are humans not a part of nature? Are the stuff we're doing, is that a part of nature or not? And then we got a little bit philosophical. I will not continue down that line. I am, after all, an engineer. I solve problems. Not conundrums, just problems. Oh yeah, hang on. I've completely forgotten something really important. There you go. There you go. You're all mods. Sort out these things between you. I have complete faith in your ability to abuse your power horribly. I'll be very disappointed if you don't. And then I didn't have a channel anymore because you usurped me. Exactly, Bill. Here in Denmark, we have a system for labeling additives to food. Like, you know, food coloring, or if you add other things like, I don't know, various quote-unquote chemicals. Exactly, sodium chloride, truly horrible. Truly, I mean, seriously, you do not, that's a chemical, that's so bad. No, but all these things are given what's known as an E number. Probably a European standard, it might actually be. But basically you'll have something like E150 or 151 or so, which is carbon. Oh yeah, but Bill, you're forgetting dihydrogen oxide, I guess would be the English term. I can't think straight at the moment, sorry. But yeah, that's also really bad. Yeah, it has killed so many people. Dihydrogen oxide, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. People mean go around a scary list of chemicals, exactly. And so on, so it's a chemical that make up an apple. Precisely. I mean, it's the chemicals in all these things, some of them actually occur naturally. But the fun thing about this E-system, the additives, the labeling of those, the hydrogen oxide. Yeah, I don't know why I cannot say that. I would be able to type it out and write it, but saying it messes up. Again, you take Coca-Cola. There are so many truly horrible things in Coca-Cola, but what is by far the largest ingredient, biggest ingredient? Water. I think. I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually sugar, but hey, what are you gonna do? But Modifian, I think you're actually right about painting the bases first. Might make sense. So why don't we do this with the king in yellow as well? Or maybe I don't. It's 8:45, so I'm just going to really quickly take a look over here, because I heard a rumor that Emma would be streaming fairly soon, and since I haven't seen her here, I figured I'd just go check out. Now Emma is known, why am I even saying this to you? You already know Emma, all of you. And yes, bad education is, well, bad by definition, but it's so sad. Yeah. Let me just... Let's see. Modifian, I win live. What is that even supposed to mean? Yeah, no. Education is... And I can't even figure out if it's education as in the schools that are breaking down, or if it's sort of society, parents not teaching people or kids to think. No, but Emma talked about streaming Hades tonight. Not entirely sure why. She has more than plenty of stuff to look at with Spiel coming up. So, but hey. Yeah, I didn't see anything from her either. And she just replied that I'll keep you guys here, caught in my stream for a while longer, and then we'll go raid Emma. She will be streaming soon. So we're just gonna do a really, really quick job on the king in yellow. And I'm going to need a bigger brush, because this is gonna take forever. This is a part where I would consider using an airbrush, but I don't want to drag all of that out. Oh, I went live on stream because you're taking my advice and going with it. Or I'm Evertagon, I went live. But you already won live. I mean, anyone who's met Helene would testify to that. So, congrats on that. So you win live and life. Much better. Now, regarding brushes, the other one I used was an official miniature painting brush from the Danish company called the Army Painter. And I kind of like the brushes. I mean, I bought it in 2014 and it's still the brush I use the most. Now, this one I'm using here is not as good, and the tip is not doing well, but for rough work like this, it is really good. It has cost me about $1, which is, again, remember this is in Denmark with high taxes and all that, so that's actually a really, really cheap brush from Søstrene Grene, which is a small, I don't know if I would call it a dollar store, but they have all sorts of weird things, and they have, generally speaking, really low prices, which is of course nice. But it's basically a crappy synthetic brush, but for a lot of work like this, cheap synthetic brushes are really good. Oh, people are saying, hey, hello, John. So I'm painting, John, I am painting the, again, we're back into Cthulhu Wars, and I am painting the faction known as the Yellow Sign, which is Hastur. And we're currently working on the king in yellow we have here. and at some point we will get to Hastur. And yes, I mean, no, I don't. I know I don't have the largest hands in the world, but it is still one huge miniature. One of the reasons I love that game is you just put, yeah, and the king has really he's fucking ripped. I mean, take a look at the abs. I mean, you can even see it on a poorly focused camera. So, but like the other factions I've been painting, John, this is just a really quick job because a friend of mine who has the game wanted them painted so they look better on table. But it's meant for tabletop viewing, and so as it tend to go, it has to look good at an arm's length. So it's not going to be detailed. It's just going to be the colors that match each faction and just doing the contrast paint. Really quick job. What's good about it for me is that it is a way for me to get back into painting and painting a lot of miniatures, getting some progress, getting some hours of brushwork done, and then I can hopefully move on to better tasks. It's kind of my way to get reacquainted with my brushes and all that, so I can do some of my own stuff soon. And what I would really love to do, I had actually thought about doing it today because I'm playing Malifaux tomorrow with a friend of mine at the Bastard Cafe in Copenhagen. But I also have this, it was a birthday gift from one of my friends, and I kind of have this, I want to get these miniatures painted first, because then that's out of the way. I can hand them over to him. We can play with them. It's also going to be fun. And then I can move on to some of the stuff I want to go into a little bit more detail. So I think from Sunday or next week, I'll be painting a lot fewer miniatures, but hopefully to a somewhat higher standard. I've got my Malifaux crew consisting of Perdita Latigo and some of her family members. They're essentially Mexican gunslingers, and if you have not come across the Malifaux world, I highly recommend looking into it just for inspiration. I always try starting, throwing out which genres they've blended, and then I always at some point stop because I forget and lose track, and if I know I always miss one or two, but I'll give it a shot anyway. Think Wild West meets Victorian steampunk meets horror meets undead meets sort of voodoo goblins out in the New Orleans area, meets Shaolin monks, meets almost anything. This is where I kind of go, yeah, I probably forgot something, but you get the point. They've blended a lot of different genres, and they've actually made a game that works with all these different things. It's also, I have to admit, the most complex miniature game I have ever played. And it's not because you have a bazillion miniatures to keep track of. You usually don't. I think I play with 7 miniatures or so. But there are so many synergies and effects at work or at play in that game, and really just feels so nice. But whenever you come up against a crew you haven't encountered and don't know, you have to be really careful, because you're going to overlook something they can do, and then all of a sudden you're going to overextend or whatever, and then this annoying little thingy is just going to grab one of your miniatures and dive into the earth with it. Not killing it, but just throwing it back up somewhere at some point. So let us do the base on Hastur as well. It seems to make sense to do it like this. So yeah. So I think we got, I mean, I definitely could have done the last 3 ones of these, done them yellow, probably also done the king in yellow, maybe even Hastur. But now I'm taking Defiant's advice, and actually painting the bases for these last ones to see how it goes. That's another thing, shade your paints. So I got this brand new table that is set up specifically for painting and doing craft things, hobby things, and I've already put so much stuff on it that I run out of space. It's typical me. But it is nice to have a place, a table, where I can have all my miniature painting stuff out, and I don't have my computer on the same desk. Well, I have my laptop, but that doesn't take up a lot of space. I don't have my large monitors. I don't have the full setup with the mouse pad and all that. This is my painting table. I'm so glad I did that. I will also at some point, when I get a little better at setting up the cameras and all that, I will mount a camera, a top mount a camera, and I'll try to do some acrylic pouring, which I've done. Well, I haven't done it for about a year now, but it is a really interesting technique where basically instead of painting a painting, you just pour the paint on it, and you get some really, really psychedelic patterns out of it. If you like to play around with color combinations and know a little bit about color theory, which I do kind of a little bit of at least, you can get some really, really wonderful results. I've seen some of the really talented and experienced people doing this. They can really control also the way they, you pour the different colors on a canvas, and then you tilt the canvas to get the paint flowing, and there are different ways of mixing the paint, thinning down the paint a lot so it flows better. There's also the color combinations. They do use different tools for applying the paint in large batches on the canvas. Like using a kind of thing that kind of looks like a trumpet, which is not a faucet. It's a, well, it'll come to me. Basically, the one that has a large container on top and then goes down into a small kind of tube. So, for instance, if you're pouring from one canister to another, you'll use that one. So, acrylic pours, yes, Emily, they're really, really cool. They're so fun to do as well. I mean, in many ways, I don't really care about the final outcome, just the fact of the process of working with the paints and seeing them spread on a canvas and just playing with them. It's just so much fun for me. But I will do that at some point, but that requires a top-mounted camera because I have to stand up and literally tilt the canvas around. So I don't have the camera set up for that yet. But it's slowly getting there. I do work full-time, so I work full-time. I play a lot of role-playing games, play a lot of games with my friends, hang out with people, try to get a little sleep once in a while. So I don't have a lot of, well, I've chosen to not take a lot of time for these other things. And Emily, it's well, you should do one. They actually, I'm semi-following a, I think, Canadian, well, she's Russian-Canadian, called Olga Solby, something like that. Search for Olga and acrylic pours. She's got a lot of videos where she is experimenting with some of the different brands of acrylic paints, and there's actually started to come out some paints that are pre-thinned, so you don't even need to mix it. You can basically use it straight from the bottle, which I think is, in many ways, really cool. But yeah, oh yes, and it's messy. But as much as I think it's cool that you can just get the thinned down paints, I also think that part of the process is thinning them to your own taste. Just deciding if you want to do a heavy mix or, yeah. But regarding the messy stuff, what I did was I just went to one of the local stores for buying, painting supplies and stuff like that, wall painting. You can buy these huge plastic sheets you use to cover the floor. Buy one of those, put it over. I used my my living room table for that. Just covered it completely, and then afterwards you're gonna spill all over the place. Then after you're done, just wrap it all up, throw it out. So I will definitely do that again soon, as he is not quite dried enough for us to keep working on him. And I can see that a lot of the yellow is still not completely dried. So yeah. So we will, I think, go see if Emma is live, because I think she is. It says Hades. So
yeah, no, I set up.
I think since I'll be waiting for quite a bit for paint to dry before I can get any further with this, I think we're just gonna go raid Emma. Thank you for joining. I've had a lot of fun. I got a lot of work done on the miniatures, as you can see here. Got all of that painted and the bases on the rest. So thank you for keeping me company. Thank you for being patient and listening to my rants. Thank you for having us. You are so kind. And let us see if I can do like this. And we will rate her in 3, 2, 1, go. And then we get the countdown. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
By
go.
the way, to Skiji for following just before, just when I went live. So thank you. And yeah, this is